A great deal of economics is about change. What we're interested in is change, how things move, and how they move together. In order to recognize change, though, you have to actually know where you are. And then you have to have some way of measuring that change. And it is measuring those changes that we're interested in. What drives them? How do they move? And how might we influence our end result? So one of the things we notice is that there are things that are what we would call dependent. They depend on something, and they tend to be what we're interested in terms of our target. We want to be able to move that. Then there's another group of possibilities, which are called independent. And these are drivers, if you will, of the target variable. So sometimes we might be able to control an independent variable. Like you might be able to control the price you have or the price that you charge. You might be able to control the amount of advertising expenditure that you have. Unfortunately, neither one is the direct target. What you're largely interested in is, say, sales volume or revenue streams that come in, or profits. What a novel idea for a firm, be worried about profits. So those are the things that you might be interested in, but you don't control profits directly, you don't control sales volume directly, and you don't control revenue directly. What you do control is something else, one of these independent variables, if you control anything. So let's think about a rather interesting conundrum, and this is about how we symbolize things. So we tend to use Q. Well, that's pretty simple. That's what we would think of as quantity or an amount. One of the problems with that is that doesn't clearly define it. It's an amount of what? So, well, let's suppose you have 3 firms in an industry, and each one produces some amount. So let's see, capital Q could be the amount produced in the industry. You can think of it as industry sales or something like that. But we are also interested in what each firm might have done. So we might think of Q subscript 1 is equal to amount, the amount from, say, firm 1. And Q2 would be the amount from firm 2, and Q3 would be the amount from firm 3. So what we have is we have 3 different firms producing potentially different amounts, and we add them up. So we would write that Q, capital letter, equals Q1 plus Q2 plus Q3. So we're adding them up, and that's a fair number of strokes. So what we do is we would write this as Q equals the sum as I equals 1 to 3 of Q subscript I. What are the pieces of this? Well, let's see. The capital sigma right there tells you that you're going to sum some things. You're going to add them all up. What are you going to add up? Well, the quantities, and the I stands for each firm, it's an index number. I equals 1 to 3. There are 3 firms, 1, 2, 3. We're adding them all up. So these expressions are equivalent. That's one of the ways we use shorthand, and it's one of the things that we have to worry about. Other symbols we're going to use are not quite so direct and may be relatively new to you in terms of looking at them, but you've actually seen them before. That was many years ago. So we have a concept called slope. And you might have thought of that as rise over run. Well, that's only true in a linear model. This is true. Rise over run because everything's aligned. The reality is it equals change in rise over change in run, where the triangle, little delta there, is a subtraction problem. So if it was, say, change in Q1 and Q2, that would be Q1 minus Q2, something along those orders. So it's a very simple subtraction problem. In other cases, we're going to use a slightly different environment. This sort of odd-looking 6 type of letter, it's actually a delta. Change in rise over change in run. This is for very small changes. It's the sort of thing that Leibniz and Newton wound up doing. And we're going to learn how to use those symbols. So one of the issues we come up with is when I write the Greek letter pi, this stands for profit. So how much profit is not revenue, not cost, but the difference between revenue and cost, which is profit. And so we might have a question about, say, how does profit change? Something of interest. With, for example, a change in quantity actually sold. So the volume of sales, not the revenue of sales, it's the volume of sales. Can be written 2 different ways. Change in profit divided by the change in the quantity. This might be Q1. So this is profit for firm 1, changing with profit or quantity of firm 1. Or if we're looking at small changes, we could write this as d pi 1 dq1. And those would be both slope terms and a measure of how things are changing. That's the idea of slopes and the symbols that we'll be using to determine slopes.